Hello everyone, this is Many Ninja speaking. Welcome to a bit of a special episode of the Bootleg Breakdown, as this one's actually a little more of a viewer request than anything, namely being of the Figure Arts Kamen Rider Cross Sea Magma figure, brought to us today by Legend Creation. For those that remember the name, yes, we have seen that for a few different bootlegs in a row at this point, and let's see what this one happens to bring. So the box itself stands at a little over 7 inches tall and is otherwise a pretty decent recreation of what the real one looks like, minus the lack of official logos and such. But otherwise, it's a pretty good representation. The main figure itself is pretty bare bones, but so was the original one for that matter. So you have the main figure and a couple of sets of hands and one little accessory which I don't recall the name of. But that's about it. Main figure itself stands at a little over 6 inches tall. If you count the top of the helmet bits, it's around, I'm going to say 6 1/4 in terms of where the rail head ends. And I'm going to be frank with my initial assessment when I was getting this thing out of the packaging. I did not like this thing one bit, and I'm going to explain why. Namely, the fact it fell apart right from the minute you removed it out of the packaging. Both shoulder pads fell completely off, and I say that loosely because generally they were never on there to begin with. They were just kind of crammed there in the packaging. The way these things are set up is that they should be kind of pegged or pinned into the shoulders themselves with these incredibly flimsy little pins that they have on there, but everything is honestly so poor in terms of quality of materials. The entire figure feels much lighter than it probably should, that I didn't want to initially mess around with these without having to heat up the figure first to try to put those on there, because I was pretty sure the plastic would snap on the attempt. And that's not where the problem stopped on the very first impression there. Namely, as you can see, the little bits related to the belt are very loose. The entire torso is incredibly loose. Everything's kind of shaking and kind of raggedy about there. And in terms of the general joints in this figure, they range from either incredibly loose, like the torso bits, to too tight to actually be functional. It's a bit of a weird combination here. As we kind of zooming in and also showing a bit how the caked on paint is definitely showed. The paint job on this thing is very heavy-handed, where it's not bare plastic like the shoulders there, which as you can see they kind of want to naturally sink down because they're not particularly well installed. There's very poor fitting in terms of the joints as a whole for those shoulders. They're just really loose. Hold the place okay-ish as long as you're not posing it too much, but they don't feel good. And the entire kind of mid-joint and waist hip area are just very loose. Just to keep in mind, this is based off what I'll come to dub as the 1.0 articulation, if you are more familiar with the Dragon Ball figure set at this point. So it should be able to pop up and down, but it's very loose on there. Unlike these leg joints here, which are also based off the 1.0 articulation, which one of them is completely seized up and didn't want to move, and the other one is just incredibly tight, and on the knees, not particularly functional. They bend one way, but you aren't able to get a full double knee bend on that. And the other one, it still doesn't work particularly well. In fact, part of that knee pad is keeping it out of place, I feel. Moving on to the head, it's technically functional, a bit loose if anything I found on my end, but it is actually working. Here's a little more of a demonstration of why I don't like that upper torso articulation, and also a little example of why the hip articulation is working. Namely, at least one of those joints are broken right there, and it's completely seized up as a result. All in all, just from the articulation standpoint, this is not a particularly good figure. I'm going to be quite frank. As you can see, it just does not want to pose particularly well. I don't feel that it would hold very good poses, and the quality of the joints are suspect at best. But we're going to have to test a little bit more of that because we have a few accessories to go with that. And one jump cut later, we have 4 out of the 5 little accessories that this particular rider came with, namely being 4 sets of hands, 2 of them in more actiony poses. One of them is supposed to be the remote holding hand, which the remote is off screen, but just to give you an idea, it's a nondescript little black piece of plastic that isn't painted of any sort. And one more hand. And while I was originally planning on this footage to show you what the hand with the remote looked like, also just to show you what the quality of the joints underneath were, as you might imagine from the struggling I have there, yeah, the joints are not very good on the hands. snapped completely there without much effort. So, for the person who asked for this particular figure review, the answer to your question is, not only is this bootleg not worthwhile, it is in fact the worst bootleg I've come across up to this point, and unlike the Sane Rays on Earth Goku and Majin Vegeta, I can't even use this one for parts. I'm actually just going to wholesale throw this out after this review. So hopefully that'll save you a few bucks and have provided a little bit of amusement for anyone else watching this particular video, and you will all join me at a later time when we'll talk about something hopefully much more competent than this. Thanks for watching, catch you all later.